What's up, people? Welcome back for part 2 of the top 10 rebuilds in the NHL. Please take the time to like and subscribe if you like the content, and let's get into it right away. So, first of the day, at number 5, I have the Utah Hockey Club, and this will be the only video ever I ever put them in the top 5 of anything if they don't change that stupid name. My vote goes with 2BC for the Utah Yetis. So, the Yetis already have some very, very good players up front and on defense. It starts with Clayton Keller, who's a dynamic winger. They have Dylan Gunther, who's a dynamic goal scorer. They also have Cooley, who might very well end up the best player of the 2022 NHL draft. They have Nick Schmaltz, who no one ever talks about, but who's consistently a top playmaker. They have Machelli, who's looking to become a consistent 50-60 point playmaker. They have Barrett Hayton, who's starting to look really, really good. They have some good bottom six players like Lawson Cruz and McBain. On defense, they have the newly acquired Mikhail Sergachev. Still can't believe this was our boy and they traded him for Drouin. They have John Marino, Sean Dursey, Michael Kesselring, who's massively underrated. This NHL roster is ready to compete. They're not contender, but they're in the mix and should probably play some meaningful games in March and maybe even make the playoff, but Dursey and Marino out for months is tough for sure. In the pipeline, the Yetis have some serious talent like Daniel Booth, who's a monster and doing very well in the KHL. Also, Tijigina, who's had a very good start in the WHL. They also have some good depth with Castagna, Josh Doan, Ratty, Noel North, Julian Lutz, and more importantly, Cole Baudouin, who should be their matchup center of the future. Defensively, they don't have the same amount of depth in the pipeline, but they have one of my favorite prospects in all of hockey with Dmitry Simashev. Pair that with Maverick Lamoureux, who just started his NHL career, and that's two very big boys on the blue line. So overall, a solid roster with some top talent coming up in the next couple of years, but their center line is a little bit on the weak side. I think Cooley will be dynamite, but Cooley, Hayton, top 6 center line doesn't strike me as top tier. They'll have a solid top 6 with depth up front. They'll have very good top 4, and they have Michael Rabral in the pipeline for the net, but his NCAA career isn't going too well. In the end, I'd focus on centers and goaltending to try to bring all of this together, but it's looking really good. And just outside of the top 3, I have the Montreal Canadiens, and if it wasn't for Hudson and Demidov, this team would be way back because they sure as hell don't look like a team on the way up. In the top 6, they have Nick Suzuki, Cole Caulfield, Slavkovsky, and Kirby Dach. The issue is that both Slavkovsky and Kirby Dach look far from fantastic when not paired with the first line duo. There's still plenty of time though. Kirby Dach missed a lot of time last season, and Slavkovsky is still just only 20 years old, but a step forward with both players this season would be welcome, that's for sure. I'm sure Laine coming back from injury will give them a little bit of a boost, since one of those two players is usually stuck on a second line with players like Armia and Newhook or something like that, so not that great, right? One of the issue also is that the current bottom 6 is a bit of a black hole offensively and doesn't have any kind of identity. You have to hope that the players who were drafted to replace them can bring a little bit of an identity and some offense. Players like Owen Beck and Oliver Kapanen, Florian Jackai, Alex Tuck, Koivu, Tyler Thorpe, all players who are destined to play in the bottom 6 with current players like Newhook, Evans, if resigned, Anderson, and Gallagher. I think it looks good enough. It's not necessarily exciting, but it's good enough. On defense, they have Matheson and Gooley, who are solid top 4 defensemen, and Hudson, who's looking like he's on his way to stardom. In the pipeline, the biggest piece by far is Ivan Demidov, for whom I have no doubt will be a star player in the NHL. But there's also Michael Hage, who's looking like to have the tools to be a top 6 option. On defense, they have David Reinbacher, who should be a stable presence on the right side of the blue line in the top 4, and also have Mayu, who also have some good potential. So when you take a top 6 of Suzuki, Caulfield, Slavkovsky, Dach, and maybe Laine, and you add Demidov, Joshua Roy, and Michael Hage, it looks very solid, except at center. Dak can't win a face-off to save his life, and it's been like that with no progression whatsoever since his junior days, where he could barely put a 40% season together. Maybe Hage is that guy, but they sure need to focus on center. I'd be down for Michael Misa or Roger McQueen for them. And on defense, they have Gooley, Hudson, Reinbacher, maybe Mayu, maybe Matheson if they resign him. So it's solid, but it's very, very young if Matheson isn't there. So in the end, they have a good mix of young NHL players and a high-end prospect coming down. Even in net, they look to be set with Jacob Fowler, but a lot of it depends on Dak and Reinbacher, and as much as I try to sell it to myself, sometimes it's hard to be completely sold. But nonetheless, the future looks bright. And at number 3, I have the Buffalo Sabres, and the Sabres are a little bit of a special case, and I'm still not completely convinced by their team. They seem to have the element to build a strong contender, but it never seems to work. They already have some very good players at the NHL level like Tage Thompson, Alex Tuch, JJ Peterka, and Dylan Cousins, mixed with some really good up-and-coming players like Jack Quinn and Zach Benson. This should be more than strong enough to build a team around. They also have some strong players for the middle six like Ryan McLeod, Jason Zucker, and players like Yuri Kulich, who should fit pretty well in that role as he adapts to the NHL. On defense, they basically have 2 number 1 defensemen in Rasmus Dahlin and Owen Power, plus they added Bowen Byram last season, who definitely needs to be better and bring more than just a transition game, but that's still what should be a very strong top 4, even when that 4th player in the top 4 is Henry Yukaharu. Look, like, it's not perfect, but just like the top 6, it's more than strong enough to build a team with. A lot of contending teams don't have that type of quality in the top 4. Because Buffalo has been drafting high for a very, very long time, they will have a constant flow of middle 6 to top 6 player over the years as they start competing. Players that are still very young with a long runway like Benson and Kulich, but also a ton of prospects like Konsta Elenius, Noah Huslin, Anton Wahlberg, Isaac Rosen, and on defense, it's definitely not overflowing with prospect, but they have a few strong candidates like Adam Kleber and Maxim Sturback. So overall, I didn't rank them 3rd because of their pipeline, because it's definitely a little bit underwhelming with no high-end player coming in the future, but I ranked them 3rd because they have one of the strongest NHL roster of any team on this list, with probably the strongest potential at defense, and the team is filled with young players who will only get better. The biggest question mark is by far the goaltending situation, in my opinion. Both Levi and Luukkonen had a good season last year with a goal saved above expected of around 10, which is great, but they are both in the negative this season. Consistent goaltending is crucial to success, and I'm not convinced those two can provide it. But in the end, future will tell us. And at number 2, I have the Chicago Blackhawks, and it took a little while for me to decide which team to put first and which team to put second, and decided to go with Chicago at number 2 for a few reasons, but they are a little bit interchangeable. If you ask me the same question in a week, I might put Chicago first, but probably not, and not today. Chicago is definitely a few years away when you look at that roster, but they got their first-line superstar center figured out in Bedard, and they also have Teravainen and Bertuzzi in the top 6, who might or might not be there when Chicago is ready to compete, and there's also Lucas Reichel, who should be playing a middle 6 role by that time. That's not a lot of players, especially when you consider that Teravainen and Bertuzzi are basically 30-year-olds who might or might not be there, and Reichel's potential is really a little bit of a question mark. Fortunately, it looks way better on defense. They have Seth Jones and Alex Vlasic, who are fantastic options in the top 4. So half of that top 4 is already figured out with many high-end prospects in the pipeline. On offense, they have a lot of depth for the middle 6, maybe some top 6, but really not that much for certain in the top 6 outside of maybe Sacha Bovard. Players like Oliver Moore, Frank Nazar, Colton Dack, John Mustard, Ryan Green, Nick Lardis, Marek Vanacker, A.G. Spelisi, and even like Roman Kantsarov are all players with a certain potential, but most of them are most likely middle 6 and not sure top 6 or first line players. So who's that player to play with Bedard in the future? The depth in the forward prospect pool for Chicago is incredible, and this team will be the fastest in the NHL, no doubt. But it's missing another elite element to pair with Bedard, in my opinion. Maybe they get Martin this year and it all changes, but for now, that's the reason why they are second. On defense, it's a different story. While they already have 2 really good players at the NHL level, they also have players like Artem Levshunov, who did just pick second overall. They have Kevin Korchinski, who had a terrible season last year in the NHL, but still projected as a top 4 player. They have Sam Renzel, who's big, fast, and productive. They have Nolan Allen in a more defensive role. They have Del Maestro, who's had a ridiculous progression since he's been drafted in 2021. They could not pick another defenseman for the next few years, and they would still be set to be one of the strongest team at defense in the NHL in like 3 or 4 years from now. I might not be as high on Lev Shunov or Korchinski as they are, but it doesn't change the fact that they should be very, very good top four options in the future. So overall, there's work to do up front to add size in the top six and to get another elite player to play with Bedard, but the depth and speed of this future roster is ridiculous. And on defense, a defense of Lev Shunov, Korchinski, Seth Jones, Vlasic, Rinzel, Allen, the Maestro is nothing short of elite in my opinion. The question now is who's gonna stop the puck? That's a different story, and I don't know the answer. And at number one, I have the Anaheim Ducks. They lack a superstar a la Bedard, but the roster is more well-rounded with size and some hard elements compared to Chicago, at least at the forward position, but the defense, while good, is not even close. At the NHL level, they already have Leo Carlsson, Mason McTavish, Trevor Zegras, Cutter Gauthier, Troy Terry. That's an elite top six in the making. There's going to be some growing pains for sure, but it's going to be a great one. Defensively, they have Pavel Mintyukov, who's going to be a number one defenseman in my opinion. They have Zellweger, who's playing top 4 minute and might be a top 4 option and is going to run the power play too in the future. But outside of that, Fowler and Gudas are 32 and 34 with 2 years on their contract. I doubt they are big factors when the Ducks become contenders. In the pipeline up front, they don't have the depth of Chicago, but they don't care because they have Beckett Seneca, who's slowly becoming a monster. When I made my report on him before the draft last season, I said that he looked bigger than the actual numbers provided, which was 6'2", I think. And as a matter of fact, he's now 6'4". He's a 6'4" winger who moves and handles the puck like he's 5'9". The way he controls the play and uses reach offensively and defensively, that guy's gonna be a beast. I just love him. They also have players like Maxime Massé, who's a big, physical, heavy shot player who projects as a middle six player. They have Kerry Terrence, Lucas Pettersson, and Sidorov, who also project as middle six, but they also drafted to create a strong and heavy identity in the bottom six with players like Nathan Gaucher, Colson Pitter or Pitt, Nico Majarovic, Ethan Prochison. It's not going to be a fun ride to play against the Ducks, that's for sure. On defense, it boils down to Tristan Luneau, Stian Solberg, and Taryn Smith, who's tearing it up in the WHL. So overall, a top six of Leo Carlsson, Mason McTavish, Trevor Zegras, Troy Terry, Cutter Gauthier, and Beckett Seneca, with other players like Massé and Sidorov who could bring their own sauce to the top six. It's such a beautiful mix of size, skills, grit, smart playmaking, and shooting ability. That's going to be a tough one to beat, with a strong middle six and very heavy physical bottom six. And on defense, you get a top four of Mintyukov, Stian Solberg, Tristan Luneau, Zellweger, and maybe even Taryn Smith in there at some point. Not the strongest out there, and I think they need to focus on that, but they'll move the puck at an elite level though. A beautiful constructed rebuild with maybe one big missing piece on D, and that's it. In net, they have Gibson for another 2 years, plus they have Dostal, who's tearing it up in the NHL with the best goals saved above expected in the NHL. It'll take some time to grow all of this to make it a competitive team, but there's a possible future where Anaheim will be the most dangerous team in the NHL who can skill you up and grind you down night after night, Florida style. So there you go. That's it for the top 10 rebuilds. Let me know if you agree and how you would rank them. But as always, thanks for watching. See you in the next one. Peace.